The memorial is over. Now, this house officially belongs to Erica. When I was back at my family home for the first time in 9 years, I was greeted with those cold remarks by my stepmother, Beth. My mind went blank, and I couldn't think of anything. What do you mean? I finally forced the question out, but was met with Beth's perfunctory shrug. My half sister, Erica, looked bored as she idly looked at her nails. Your dad agreed on it. We've already started the legal paperwork. Right, honey? When Beth glanced at Dad on the sofa, he looked away from me and nodded weakly. He wasn't the strong man I remembered. I scanned the house. The classic interiors Mom loved were gone, replaced by cheap gold trimmings and garish pink furniture, which were obviously Erica's taste. What about my room? Oh, sorry about that. We needed somewhere to put Erica's clothes, so we're using it as her closet. You'll be fine with the guest room, won't you? Erica laughed at me with a mocking smile. You have only an old box in the attic. Don't worry about it. My body trembled with anger. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate takeover. Dad was clearly under some sort of pressure. More than anything, this house is the property that Mom put my name on as a co-owner when she was alive. My rights should be legally protected. This isn't something that can be decided by Dad's agreement alone. I forced myself to stay calm. During the 9 years I spent in the city, I'd learned more than business skills. I'd learned a stubborn refusal to back down in the face of wrongdoing. I would uncover whatever Beth and Erica were plotting. I would get Dad and this house back. My fight started then. I kept my composure in front of them, but the moment I entered the guest room, I pulled my smartphone from my bag and sent a short message to Richard, my college best friend who has become a trustworthy real estate attorney. Hi, Richard. It's urgent. I need a copy of the deed for my parents' house and the joint ownership agreement my mom set up 9 years ago. Please send it as soon as you can. His reply came immediately. Got it, what happened? I'll tell you later, I answered and started turning things over in my head. Why was Dad so listless? He looked like he was being controlled by Beth. Was he being manipulated? Or did she have some leverage over him? Back in the living room, Erica was on a loud video call with someone who sounded like a friend. Yes, we're going to Las Vegas next month. We have to book a suite. Money, don't worry, our house is our ATM. Hearing that, my suspicions hardened into certainty. They were literally feeding off this house. When I sat on the sofa, Erica theatrically ended the call and exchanged a look with Beth. So, Denise, how long do you plan to stay? Beth studied me with probing eyes. I'm going to be here for a while, sorting through Grandma's things, and I'm a little worried about Dad. Your dad is in good hands with us, so don't worry. You have your life in the city, right? Wouldn't it be better for you to go back soon? It was a thinly veiled push to drive me out. Dad listened but said nothing, his eyes fixed on the television. The house was completely under their control, but did their control have legal backing? Once Richard's documents arrived, everything would become clear. Until then, I had to lull the enemy into complacency and gather information. I put on a pleasant smile. Of course, I don't plan to stay long, but I want to spend some time with Dad while I'm here. Behind that false smile, I quietly and coldly began plotting how to evict them from the house. The next afternoon, Richard messaged me. I've uploaded the documents you requested to the secure server. I'll send the link and password separately. A few minutes later, an encrypted password arrived and I locked my bedroom door. I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and accessed the link. Everything I'd asked for was there. First, an official digital copy of the most recent title issued by the county recorder. Then, a PDF of the joint ownership agreement Mom had executed and notarized while she was alive. I read the contract's clauses word for word, devouring each line. There, Mom's intention was written plainly. Upon my death, my 50% ownership in the property shall be legally transferred to my daughter, Denise Johnson. Hence, the property shall be owned jointly by my husband and daughter. This was it. This was my weapon. When I noticed the law firm's logo in the corner of the contract, I remembered. It was drawn up by Mom's trusted attorney, Richard's father. Richard had not only inherited his father's law firm, but also his promise to Mom to take care of Denise. The original document was safely stored in their firm's vault. What I had was a digital copy Richard had prepared for me. But inside the same folder, there was another file, one that Richard added after doing his own research. It was a copy of a loan agreement using this very house as collateral. 3 months ago, Beth and Erica had taken out a loan for $200,000. When I looked at the signature section, my breath was caught. There it was, Dad's signature and another one, mine. It was a crude imitation of my handwriting, an obvious forgery. $200,000. Erica's words from earlier, the suite in Las Vegas, flashed through my mind. They hadn't just deceived Dad. They had forged my signature to deceive the bank as well. This wasn't merely fraud, it was an undeniable crime. I struggled to contain the fury rising inside me. I called Richard. I've checked the files. Thank you. The situation's worse than I imagined. They forged my signature. I briefly explained what had happened over the past few days and about the loan. What? That crosses a serious line, Denise. You need to act immediately. Forgery is a felony. I know. But first, I need to talk to Dad. I have to find out why he allowed this to happen. Be careful. You never know what they'll do when cornered. With Richard's advice in mind, I closed my laptop. The evidence was all there. This wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It was the continuation of a promise passed down from Mom, to Richard's father, to Richard himself. I stood quietly but with resolve and made my way to Dad's study. When I knocked, I heard his faint voice from inside. Come in. He was sitting alone, looking through an old photo album. When he noticed me enter, he quickly tried to close it. But I'd already seen it. It was an old family album filled with pictures of Mom and me. Dad, we need to talk. I sat down in the chair opposite him. Is it true you're transferring this house into Erica's name? His shoulders flinched at my blunt question. He stayed silent for a moment and then finally spoke with a heavy voice. Beth said it would be for the best. I'm getting old and it's for Erica's future. For her future? Dad, do you even know? They used this house as collateral to take out a $200,000 loan. His expression faltered with shock at those words. What? No, that must be some kind of mistake. I only signed the papers because the business needed a little funding. I never imagined it was for such a large sum. So he had been deceived. I pressed on. What kind of business exactly? Erica's luxury shopping trips to Las Vegas? Denise, how dare you say that? You shouldn't accuse your own family. His voice rose, but I could see doubt flicker in his eyes. I decided to play my final card. Dad, maybe you've forgotten, but this house originally belonged to Mom. When you married her, she added your name to the title, remember? He frowned, thinking. Maybe. And before she died, she legally arranged for her share to be transferred to me, which means this house is now jointly owned by you and me. It's not yours alone. His eyes widened and his face paled. He had truly believed he was the sole owner after Mom's death. What? She never told me that. She quietly handled the legal arrangements with her lawyer to protect me in case anything happened. Without my consent, the ownership of this house cannot be transferred to anyone, nor can it be used as collateral. What Beth and Erica are doing is completely illegal. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. As if I prayed that somewhere behind those weary, frightened eyes, the wise and strong man I once knew still remained. He sat speechless, and a heavy silence filled the study. Then, what are you two whispering about? The door swung open forcefully, and Beth stood there with her arms crossed. Behind her, Erica peeked in, wearing that smug, curious smile. They must have been eavesdropping in the hallway. Beth, no, this isn't... Dad began, but Beth cut him off, her glare fixed on me. Denise, ever since you came back, you've been snooping around, watching everything we do. What exactly is your goal here? My goal, that's my question for you. What are you and Erica really doing in this house? And why are you deceiving Dad? There was no point in pretending anymore. Erica let out an exaggerated gasp. What did you just say? We deceived Dad? How dare you? We've been taking care of an elderly man and protecting this house. We're the ones holding everything together. Protecting it? I shot back coldly. You took out a $200,000 loan against it. Some protection, that is. At those words, their faces changed in an instant. I'd hit the mark. Beth quickly forced a smile, but her eyes didn't match it. I don't know what you're talking about. A loan? That's nonsense. Right, honey? She looked to Dad for agreement, but he, confused by what I had just said, simply kept his head down and said nothing. Beth clicked her tongue softly, then faced me again. Anyway, this house is no longer your concern. You moved out years ago. You have no right to meddle in our affairs. Go back to New York where you belong. If not, she stepped forward and whispered in my ear, you'd rather not find out what might happen to that precious career of yours. It was an outright threat, but instead of fear, it ignited a white-hot flame of fury inside me. I met her gaze without flinching. Try it, but I think you'll find yourself standing in court before I ever lose my job. A volley of blazing glares exchanged between us. Meanwhile, Dad just sat there looking terrified. The battle gong had rung. After the argument with Beth and Erica, I returned to my room, determined to avoid any reckless moves for the sake of my own safety. They would do anything to drive me out. Suppressing my anger, I quietly revisited my plan of action. The forged loan documents were damning, but not enough to fully wake Dad from his trance. I needed something stronger. Evidence that struck at the heart that no one could deny. First, I had to figure out exactly what had disappeared from the house. Late that night, once everyone had gone to bed, I quietly slipped out of my room. I headed to the living room, to the antique display cabinet that had once belonged to Mom. It used to hold the silver tea set my grandmother had left Mom in her will, and the European porcelain dolls Mom had bought with her own salary before she married. But when I opened the glass doors, my breath was caught. The shelves were empty. Only a single cheap plastic vase sat there. It was absurd. A chill ran through my chest. Those weren't just decorations. They should have been family treasures, filled with memories of Mom and Grandma. I then slipped into Dad's study. The portrait of my maternal grandpa that used to hang on the wall was gone. It was a painting Mom had brought from her family home. I opened the drawers. The bundle of old letters and photographs Dad used to keep, all of Mom's things, had vanished too. As I moved through the house, my suspicion turned into something darker. Dread. What had been taken wasn't only valuable possessions. It was our history. Every trace of Mom's presence being erased deliberately, piece by piece. This wasn't merely about seizing property. It was something crueler, a destruction of spirit. Beth and Erica weren't just draining the house of its wealth, they were erasing its soul, cutting Dad off from his past so they could rule over him completely. I took out my phone and began quietly photographing everything. The empty cabinet, the walls now covered in Erica's posters, every place where the past had been wiped away. Every image would become evidence. Until dawn, I moved through the house like a ghost, documenting what had been lost. But searching the house alone wasn't enough. If they'd sold Mother's things, I needed objective proof that those items were ours. I climbed up to the attic, the one part of the house still untouched by them. There, inside an old trunk, I found stacks of family photo albums. For an hour, I flipped through them until I found what I was looking for. A photo from Mom's birthday, taken right in front of the living room cabinet. The silver tea set and porcelain dolls were clearly visible. I also found another photo. It was on Christmas Day in the study with Grandpa's portrait hanging behind us. I took high-resolution photos of each image and saved them on my phone as digital proof. I was then ready. The next morning, I told my family that I was going to meet an old friend. Then I got in my car and drove downtown to an antique shop. The shopkeeper, Peter, is Mom's longtime friend. Denise, I'm so sorry about your grandmother's passing. Thank you, Peter. It's been a while. Actually, I came because I need your help with something. I got straight to the point and told him I was looking for several items. Then I showed him the family photos saved on my phone. Do you recognize this tea set or these porcelain dolls? The moment Peter looked at the photos, his expression hardened. Yes, I do. Denise, listen carefully. A few months ago, your stepmother Beth came to my shop and sold me the very same tea set and porcelain dolls that appear in this picture. My heart froze. She said with tears in her eyes that she was struggling financially. I couldn't bring myself to refuse, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Peter went to the back of the store and returned with a copy of the purchase contract, complete with Beth's signature. The date of purchase was clearly recorded. It matched perfectly with the timing of the loan. Peter, could I ask you to provide a copy of this contract and, if necessary, your testimony? Of course. I'll gladly help for your mom's sake. I finally had irrefutable proof. There was no way Beth could claim the items were hers. I thanked Peter and left the shop. Clenching my lips in anger, I drove toward my next destination. I still had other allies in the town. The pieces needed to expose Beth and Erica's lies were steadily coming together. After obtaining the decisive evidence from the antique shop, I immediately sent all the digital data to Richard. Family photos, Peter's signed purchase record, and the loan demand notice in Erica's name. Over the phone, Richard's voice trembled with a mix of outrage and resolve. "Denise, this isn't something we can settle with a warning letter anymore. This is clear theft, fraud, and forgery. We need to file for an emergency injunction right now." "An injunction?" "Yes. We'll present the evidence to a judge and freeze all further property transactions, the house, the furnishings, and their bank accounts. They won't be able to touch a thing. This will also put a stop to the fraudulent loan agreement that disregarded your co-ownership rights." He assured me that the contract that his father had prepared for Mom, combined with the evidence I had gathered, were powerful enough to convince a judge. Beth and Erica probably don't even realize how deep they've gone into criminal territory. When the court order arrives, they'll finally understand what they've done. "Please, Richard, start the process right away." "I'm already on it. I'll prepare the petition tonight and file it first thing in the morning. If everything goes smoothly, the injunction should be granted within a week." For the next week, I waited in my hotel room, barely breathing. It was a long and nerve-wracking wait, but Richard called every day, his steady voice keeping me grounded. Then finally, his message came. "Denise, we did it. The order's been granted. The court clerk is on the way to your father's house right now to serve the documents to both Beth and your father personally. Stay put. Don't go near the house. Wait in your hotel." I swallowed hard. This was it. The law, an unyielding, impartial force, was moving toward that house. From my hotel window, I stared into the distance, toward my family home. After Richard's last message, "The clerk's on the way," I waited in tense silence. Outside, the evening was settling in. It had probably been 30 minutes since the clerk arrived. What was happening inside the house? Then my phone lit up. Richard was calling. "Denise, it's done." His voice burst with triumph. "The clerk just reported back. The injunction was officially served to Beth and to your father himself. It's now legally binding." "I see. And how did they react?" The report was brief, but it says plenty. Apparently, Beth asked several questions right there, specifically about the co-ownership clause and the extent of the asset freeze. She was very persistent. I could hear the faintest grin in Richard's voice. I can picture it. Her panicking, scrambling for loopholes. And Erica? She apparently asked the clerk if this meant she couldn't make personal purchases anymore. Says a lot about her priorities. At his words, I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. What about my dad? The report only said this. No notable reaction. I imagine he was too shocked to speak. He's probably just realized what he's been complicit in. Richard took a quiet breath, his tone softening. "Denise, round one is completely ours. They can't move another inch. The real battle starts now, but tonight, you've earned the right to breathe a little easier." "Thank you, Richard. Really." Tears welled up as I whispered my gratitude. After hanging up, I gazed out at the city lights beyond the window. The balance of power had shifted. Completely. Next, it would be my turn to step into that house and reclaim everything they'd stolen. The next morning, I rode with Richard to my family home. After that long, sleepless night alone in the hotel, having him beside me was the greatest comfort I could have asked for. Richard took my hand firmly. "You're not alone. I'm here," he said with quiet strength. When we arrived at the house, it was unnaturally silent. When I rang the doorbell, Dad opened the door, looking haggard. He averted his eyes awkwardly at the sight of Richard. In the living room, Beth and Erica sat on the sofa like ghosts. Their once hostile energy had vanished, replaced by blank, lifeless stares into the void. On the table lay the court injunction, still unfolded. "Well then, I'm here today on behalf of my client, Denise Johnson, to discuss what comes next." He opened his briefcase and spread a stack of documents across the table. Among them were Mom's co-ownership agreement, the fraudulent loan contract, the antique shop's sales records from Peter's store, and the demand letters for Erica's gambling debts. First of all, based on this co-ownership agreement, the mortgage arranged without Denise's consent is null and void. And Beth, regarding this loan document you submitted to the bank, he pointed to the signature line. This signature of Denise's, you forged it, didn't you? A handwriting analysis will confirm it instantly. This is document forgery, a serious felony. At his icy words, the color drained from Beth's face. Next, about these items. You sold them to an antique shop, but they were the personal belongings of Denise's late mother, Wynne. Denise inherited them rightfully. Selling them without consent constitutes a violation of inheritance rights, and an unlawful act. He placed the family photo showing the silver tea set and the sales contract from Peter's store side by side, thrusting them toward Beth. She gasped and bit her lip, unable to speak. And you, Erica, you have significant gambling debts, don't you? Did you deceive your father and use the household funds to pay them off? That's fraud of the worst kind. Erica turned pale as paper, trembling uncontrollably. With every piece of evidence laid bare before them, their web of lies had completely unraveled. The net was closed, and only the final blow remained. All the evidence lay spread across the table, and the living room was enveloped in a heavy silence. Dad's hands shook as he flipped through the documents one by one, the mortgage, the debt notices, until his fingers froze. An old family photo of Mom smiling and the sales contract bearing Beth's signature. He compared them over and over. This is Wynne's silver tea set. She cherished it. It's been in her family since her mother's time. His voice was thin, filled with disbelief. He slowly lifted his head and looked at Beth, then at Erica. His eyes no longer held confusion or fatigue. In their depths burned quiet fury, grief mixed with betrayal. You sold this? You lied to me by saying we were struggling and sold Wynne's memories for cash? His voice rose, trembling with rage. I didn't know. I didn't realize how important it was. Beth tried to excuse herself in a high-pitched voice, but it was already too late. You didn't know? You've seen me alone night after night looking at Wynne's album, weeping. You knew how much I loved her, how much I treasured her memory. Don't you dare say you didn't know. He slammed the table and stood up. Erica shrank back, terrified. Dad, please calm down. Silence. Your gambling debts destroyed our home. The house Wynne left us, the life she built. It's all in ruins because of you two. You deceived me, and you tried to erase Wynne from this house, from my heart. Tears streamed down his face, tears of regret and of love too long buried. Then he turned to me with a breaking voice. Denise, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I failed you as a father. He collapsed to his knees. Without a word, I walked over and placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Beth and Erica stood motionless, pale as ghosts. Their complete defeat was undeniable. And at that moment, our family finally took its first step toward true restoration. Months later, we stood in the courtroom of the county courthouse. Backed by Richard's meticulous documentation, the trial had gone entirely in our favor. Beth and Erica's defense, that father had consented and we didn't know about the co-ownership, crumbled under Peter's testimony and the records of Erica's gambling debts. And then came the day of judgment. The court recognizes that the actions of the defendants, Beth Johnson and Erica Johnson, constitute deliberate and malicious misconduct against the plaintiff, Denise Johnson, and her father. Therefore, all contracts relating to the fraudulent mortgage and the transfer of ownership are hereby rendered null and void. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. Beside me, Dad listened in breathless silence. Furthermore, the defendants are jointly ordered to pay restitution of $200,000 for the fraudulent loan and $50,000 for the unlawfully sold assets. Then came the final decisive words. In addition, evidence of the forged signature clearly meets the criteria for criminal prosecution. The court will forward this record to the district attorney's office. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. All color drained from Beth's face. She and Erica were facing criminal prosecution separate from the civil trial. Afterward, the prosecution launched an investigation, and handwriting analysis confirmed that Beth had indeed forged the documents. She was indicted for forgery of private documents and for the use of forged private documents. In the criminal trial, Beth was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison, suspended. In the civil court, she faced a massive damages payment. In the criminal court, she carried a criminal record. The price Beth had to pay was far heavier than she had ever imagined. When the judge finally declared the session closed, our victory was complete. The ownership of the house was fully and legally restored to its rightful state. Beth and Erica, pale and exhausted, fled the courthouse, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. Outside the courthouse, Dad turned to me and said, "Denise, thank you so much. Truly. And I'm so sorry." "It's all right now, Dad. What matters is what we do from here." Yes, I have decided to divorce Beth. And this house, the home that you and Wynn loved, I want to rebuild it with our own hands again. I nodded in silence. In the next few months since then, Dad's face had regained a vitality that made him almost unrecognizable. The battle that had begun when I returned home after 9 long years had finally come to an end. We had lost much, but what we saved was far greater. We protected our bond as a family and the house Mom left behind. 2 years passed after the trial. Dad's divorce from Beth was finalized, and I had begun to visit the house again, little by little, rediscovering peaceful days with him. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. It was Richard. "Denise, I thought you'd want to hear some news about Beth and Erica." His voice carried a hint of amusement. Apparently, Beth is still on probation, living quietly with Erica. Their lives are anything but stable. I could almost picture it. "Beth's situation sounds even worse," Richard went on. "Her pride hasn't changed, but no one will hire her. She's been attending matchmaking events, hoping to find another wealthy man. But word of her past follows her everywhere. No one wants anything to do with her. She's been seen living alone in a small apartment in the next town. They say her once elegant appearance is completely gone. That's the fate of the woman who tried to take everything from our family in exchange for a life of luxury. Her future is one where she would wither away unloved, in loneliness and poverty. It's called karma." I nodded at his words. She and Erica tried to take far more than money from us. They tried to steal my mother's memory, my father's pride, and our family's entire history. Now they're paying the price for every bit of it. After I hung up, my eyes drifted to the glass cabinet in the living room. Inside, the silver tea set gleamed softly. It's the very same one Peter had helped Dad to repurchase. Not everything we lost could be restored, but this home has found peace again through our own hands. The castle of sand that Beth and Erica had dreamed of has completely crumbled, leaving only what truly holds value behind.